We're in late July, and you know what that means? That's right, we're in full-on major release drought season. This is usually my favorite time of year because it gives me the opportunity to tackle some of the things I got off the Steam Summer Sale without the big stuff getting in the way. Case in point, Prodigal, a neat little Zelda-like by ColorGrave. It's so neat that I'm going to tell you why it is, so strap in everyone. So the basic setup for Prodigal is that you play as the default named Orin, but you can swap in your own name at the start. You, in backstory, stole a bunch of money from your parents and sailed south. Years later, you get a letter from your grandfather informing you that your parents have passed away, and that you need to come back to the homeland to take care of some things. From there, it eases into a rhythm of helping and meeting the various townfolk of the island, and making amends with your grandfather until we get to the end of Act 1, and then shit just jumps. And this is also where the things start to get more and more interesting. The game makes you think that it's telling a small story about reconnecting with your old community in the wake of tragedy, but the main story very much goes into the realm of a revenge story wrapped up in ancient history, and it was both unexpected and cool to see. And yes, notice how I said main story, because there's also side stories and interacting with characters that very much fills the niche of reconnecting with your old community in the wake of tragedy that the main story starts out on, and that actually ties into the main gameplay. But before I get to that, I need to talk a bit more about the writing real fast. For the main story that it's trying to tell, it's serviceable, but it shines in the character and side quest writing. A lot of that has to do with the fact that you are interacting with a colorful cast of characters in town and in the various overworld dungeons you explore as well. My favorite example of this has to be when I engaged with a lengthy fetch quest like in Link's Awakening or the Oracle games, and I was getting to my wit's end with it, and then I got to a part of the chain where the text went, "Finally, someone didn't ask me for something," and I laughed out loud. This was the primest example of the game not only having a sense of humor about itself, but also when to do just enough for the bit to not get too intrusive. And I'll admit, it was actually a really good burn. And on the character front, you've got an assortment of characters that would feel right at home in either Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon, but in the context of a fantasy setting. And then there's this big burly motherfucker that my internal voice immediately jumped to being the Flying Dutchman from SpongeBob. The writing in Prodigal is very lighthearted in the same way that Link's Awakening was. Not to the degree that you basically had Mario showing up in a cameo, but the game knows how to poke fun at itself is what I'm saying. Overall, it's pretty simple in a keep it simple for your first game way, but that doesn't apply to the gameplay and especially the structure, so let's dig into that a bit. Prodigal is a top-down action-adventure game that is heavy on puzzles, or in a less word-salad kind of way, it's a game inspired by The Legend of Zelda. But most specifically, The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening. Everything about it just screams Link's Awakening, from the map to the dungeons to even the screen transitions. Prodigal almost immediately throws you in, with introducing you to the townsfolk, particularly the librarian, for hints, and then you get approached by your grandfather's apprentice Bolivar for help, which then sets in motion you getting the supplies needed to make a fancy schmancy sword. During which, you find the first dungeon, if it can even be called that, and get your hands on the pickaxe, your main mode of interaction with the world, and your main weapon. You know, between this and Shovel Knight, I should have 2 nickels between the protagonists of throwback games using mining equipment as their main weapons. It does it all. It smashes rocks, it bashes enemies, it moves barrels, and that's about it. You get other tools, like a lasso called the Lariat that fulfills the hookshot component of the arsenal, this oversized boxing glove called the Rusted Knuckle that you can use for moving bigger rocks and cannonballs, and the Dread Hand, this weird shadow thing that grabs you and sends you to the entrance of the room that you just entered. You also get a pair of winged boots that let you move around at the speed of sound like the Pegasus boots. And that's about it. You can get upgrades for all of these, but at the same time, the main story doesn't really need them. And this comes down to the dungeon design. In Prodigal, you get dungeons that are more or less handcrafted to your small suite of equipment. You go in, get as far as you can with the current stock, get the new item, and then proceed through the various puzzles until you get to the boss. And the thing I love is that these are some great fucking puzzles. As you can see, I'm sussing out the solutions in real time and it felt great. I haven't had to look up a walkthrough once, and for me, a guy who's bad at puzzle-related anything, that's great to see. And all of these dungeons are pretty straightforward, aside from some rooms off the beaten path that have extra items for side quests and health upgrades. You just go in, do the puzzles, kill the admittedly too easy bosses, and collect your loot. The main story has about 9 dungeons in it, and I'm on the penultimate one according to my quick searching at the time of writing. They're not on par with the best Zelda dungeons, but they are pretty good and have well-designed puzzles. And to be fair, very few games that ape this style are, unless we count the original Darksiders, my favorite Zelda game. There's also a bunch of dating sim elements that I never interacted with, but those are tied into the post-game, and I forgot that there was a whole ass post-game with new dungeons and items, and it really opens up. It's actually super cool. If there's one complaint I have, it's that when you die, you get sent all the way back to the village church and have to walk back to the dungeon. Which is really annoying, but it does get alleviated late in the main story by the acquisition of the winged boots. Because those make you sprint, and that makes the dungeon walkbacks a breeze. And there's more anti-frustration features on top of that, like not needing a big key for every boss room, these neat statues that are teleporters to the midpoint and aforementioned boss rooms, etc. There are also more mitigating factors, like purchasable meals for extra health, or potions that increase your luck and more. And there's a functioning day and night cycle, which I've yet to determine the existence of, but it gives me this hilarious visual of being stuck in dungeons for days at a time, and by the time you get out, it's been like a week or something. You eventually get into a loop of waking up, going to the library for a hint, going to the shops for item bonuses, going to the dungeons, completing the dungeons, and going home to sleep in your bed. Prodigal is interesting in that while you can tell that it's very much a developer's first game, it also has a lot of big ideas that they could have cut and saved for a sequel, but then went the fuck it we ball approach and put them in anyway. And I kind of respect that. While it's ultimately a simple game, it's also much more ambitious than it first appears, and I think that's pretty good. It actually has me interested in checking out the sequel Veritas, which apparently refines the dungeoneering much more, and I like the sound of that. And now, with all of that out of the way, I think I'll gush about Prodigal's aesthetics for a bit. Prodigal looks and sounds like a long-lost Game Boy Color game in the best way. And while a lot of that comes from one of the few areas of nostalgia that I'll allow myself these days, it does a lot of tricks that makes it feel like something you'd lose in development studio closures that then got dumped onto the internet years later in an attempt to preserve it. Or as a really good fan game homage for a long-lost, forgotten series of games that only came out in Japan. That's the kind of energy this aesthetic gives off. And I mean that in the most complimentary sense imaginable, because this art style is really cute. From the portraits, to the buildings, to the overworld sprites, to the enemies, to even the user interface and music, it all has a sense of cuteness accompanying it that I can't help but find charming in a way. But it also feels like it goes even further than homage at times. It goes out of its way to do things sprite-wise that feel like they couldn't do on the Game Boy Color. The big beefy sailor guy is the first thing that comes to mind. And it also helps that the art style is bolstered by it. All of the characters look unique and interesting in their own way, and the bosses as well look a special kind of intimidating, until you realize how easy they are to fight. The music is also really good. It's got the perfect, as I like to call it, you're going on an adventure soundtrack. It knows when to be playful, it knows when to kick in the mysterious shit, it knows when to be dramatic, you know. Hitting tones with sounds that someone who studied music could probably tell you more in depth than I could. It's an audio-visual treat, as I like to call stuff I enjoy on this channel. Prodigal is a pretty good Zelda-like. It may be a bit on the easy side, and there are a few things here and there that annoy me, but at the end of the day, you can tell from the art, the music, the gameplay, really everything about it is a labor of love. Would I recommend this over a regular Zelda game? Yeah, I would, but that's mainly because I'm not as big on Zelda's setting and aesthetic outside of Wind Waker, as seen by Darksiders 1 being my favorite Zelda game. But seriously, Prodigal is a good game, and you can probably get it for cheap with its sequel. So, go for it, I say. And that'll be it for this week's video. I appreciate you for making it this far, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend. Take care of yourselves out there.